Last major topic in our course. So let me just first show you where we are. So we have been going through this journey, and currently we are here. This is the last stop of the course. Plus we will have some web security to protect our application. So currently we are familiar, you are familiar with building user interfaces using this set of technologies. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But professionally, in professional world, people build the user interface using components-based UI. And to be able to do this component-based user interface, there are many alternative solutions to help you achieve this. One of them happens to be React. And in this course, or in this session, I will be introducing what React is, how we build components in React, how we get these components to interact with each other, and I will be explaining what a routing is. Okay, first of all, as I explained last time, React is a library that allows me to build component-based UI. What I mean component-based UI, so instead of building a component as one piece, I build my component as a set of, I build my UI as a set of components. So this is component 1, component 2, component 3, component 4. I build them separately. It could be even different teams. It could be, we test them, we build them separately. And then what the user interface will become? A composition of this component. Composition of components. So the composition of components, the composition of the UI becomes a composition of components. Yeah? And the React helps me to do this. So what do you think? What will be the role of React?
To define components.
It will help me to build these components, and also it will help me to get this component to communicate with each other, if I need to get them to communicate. So that's what the role of React. So just to make the picture clearer, I showed you last time, if we take something like Twitter, it could, the Twitter, instead of building the Twitter UI as one page, we could have the world trend as one component, the suggested people to follow as another component. The tweets themselves is a third component. The search is another component, and so on. Some components are independent. For example, this one is independent. It does not talk to any other component. But maybe this list of tweets can talk to this search component. So there is a dependency between the search and the list. So some of the components need to interact with each other. Others, they are self-contained, independent. So let me give you another example here, what we mean by component-based. So this is a page here, a user interface. So instead of building it as one unit, I make the navbar as a component. So the navbar is one component. The search is another component. Carousel is another component. The product item is a component. And even these stars by themselves is a component. And you can see I am already reusing on the same page, reusing this component 3 times and reusing this component 3 times. And this footer, yet another component. And then I can bring these components together to build the page. This is the power of React. This is another example here. So even the card, if I want to display the card, so the whole card, this is one component. Each line is a component, and the buttons are components. So the idea here of a component is that my app my user interface becomes a set of components. And what React allows me to do, it's an open source library from Facebook. It was open sourced in middle of 2013, so around 6 years old. And it allows us to build component-based user interfaces. And the UI becomes a composition of reusable components. So basically, what is the motivation of going for components? What are the two advantages of doing component-based? One is increased reusability. And what's the other major advantage?
Small problems like big problems.
Yes. So what is the advantage?
No component.
Reduced complexity. These are the two major advantages. Yes? Two major advantages why component-based is so important. When you have something complex, how do you control complexity? Decomposition. And once you decompose, those elements have more chance of being reused. That's basically the idea. And you will see this very, very concretely as we move forward. Now, each component, it provides, so each component has a UI and it has some behave, as I will explain shortly. So each component has a user interface elements and some functionality associated with that user interface elements. That's what a component is. And at the end of the day, React makes it much easier to build single-page application. What I mean here by single-page application, the whole application will have one page, one HTML page. And then as the user navigates or clicks links or interacts with the application, we load components. So the whole page is the whole application is one page. And then as the user interacts, we will load components. React is not the only player out there to build components-based application. There are other alternatives, such as Angular, but more complex, and Vue, less complex. But React happens to be very popular these days for two reasons. One is relative simplicity compared to other frameworks. The other, Angular, they overdid it. It's a bit too complicated, except for very large projects. The other reason why React appears to be one of the winners is because of this React Native. What this React Native allows us to do is that once you learn React and you already know the basic web development skills, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can take those skills and move them to mobile development. So not only you get the title of web developer, you also can get the title of mobile developer with the exact same skills. Yeah. So let me show you this concretely. Expo Hello World. I just want to show you this concretely what it means. So in here you can see here it looks very, very similar. Not similar. This is the JavaScript, and these are React components. And basically, you can build a mobile app targeting Android and iOS using the same skill, same set of skills. And this is what really made React very, very popular. And when you build such application, you can basically compile it as an Android app, same code, compile it either as an Android app or as an iOS app. That's what made Angular even more popular, because the investment you put in learning React, you can extend it to mobile development. This is how your architecture of your web application will look like. This is a single-page application. On the back end, you're already familiar with this. So you have your logic, and you're exposing your logic to the outside world through Web API. And your implementation logic will typically interact with some kind of database, particularly MongoDB. And then on the client side, you have your user interface, and this user interface is made up of components. And the architecture of this application is single page. You have single page in your application, and the rest is components that get loaded as the user interacts with the app. Okay, now, so in terms of learning React, you need to learn three major things. One is how to build components. Two is how to get these components to communicate with each other. Three is to do what is known as a routing. And I will explain this later. Routing means, let's say if I'm in a menu, when the user clicks jobs, I load the jobs component. When the user clicks add job, I load the add job component. when the user clicks, let's say, summary reports, I load the summary reports component. And I can do this very, very easily using something called routing. Okay, so now let's dive into the details one step at a time. So first of all, as I explained, the React component is something self-contained. Self-contained means inside it you find the user interface and you find the logic related to that user interface in one unit, encapsulated. And the other thing, this component is typically reusable. I can reuse it again and again and again. Okay. What do we find? If we open the component, what do we find? We find that the component at the end of the day will return some UI elements, some HTML elements. And inside, not visible to the outside world, I might have some data that I manage. The component managed inside the component. This data that the component managed inside, and it is a private data. What do we call the data that the component manages inside? State. Very critical concept. State is the private data the components manage inside. And also within the components could have some user interfaces. The user might interact with them, such as clicking or changing. The component could handle those events. So at the end, if we open the component, this is what we find. Three things. We find the user interface the component will return. We might find some state that the component is managing. And I might find some event handlers inside the component. This is what we find. So components will have the UI and display logic. And really, when you build in a component, you are building a new HTML tag. And I will show you this shortly, what it means. Okay, so let's jump to an example. So here is our first component. This is how a React component looks like. This is a component. So based on this, can somebody please define what component is in React? Function. It is a function. Okay. What does it do? It returns something that looks like HTML. Okay. This is not really HTML. What do we call the syntax that React is returning? JSX. Okay. JSX. So if I say here React JSX, it's called JavaScript Extension. So it looks like HTML, but in reality, what it is a JavaScript object. So this HTML-looking string, in reality, it is, where is Babel? Here it is. Here's Babel. In reality, it is an HTML, it is an object. So this JSX string is getting translated into this, which is basically a user interface element created using React. Yeah. So it will come, but for now, what I recommend, if you are not grasping the concept, at least try to get it mechanically, like what it means, what it is, and then gradually things will click. For now, let's just, from this example, what is a React component? It's a function. What does it return? JSX user interface that gets really translated into JavaScript object. Yes? Who translated this to JavaScript object? No, there is a library called Babel. This library, very famous library. This library called Babel, what it does, it translates JSX elements into the corresponding JavaScript objects. So at the end of the day, in a simple term, a component is a JavaScript function that returns JSX. Now, once I build this function, how can I use it? The way I can use it, I basically, let me just remove this. When I create a component, I am really creating a new HTML tag. You know the HTML tags? Somebody can give me some examples?
H1,
H1, H2, from, input, capture, label, paragraph, and so on. Yeah. Now, when you're creating a React component, what are you really creating? A new HTML tag. You are creating a new HTML tag. What is the name of this HTML tag? Hello. What is the convention when you name the functions that you create that return components?
it's the same name as
All other functions, what is the convention? Lowercase. Except the components, React component, you should name them uppercase. This is the convention. Yeah? React police will not catch you if you don't do this, but other React developers will not consider you as a professional React developer. Professional React developers, they make their component name start with uppercase. Yes, please.
Can we target these normally using styles?
Yes. This becomes like an HTML element. Right? And you will see.
I mean, just like we target H1, we will target the hello.
Exactly the same. Okay, exactly the same. You see here, it looks like a tag. Can you see I'm using it here? Let me just remove this one so I don't scare you. I'm using it here, exactly the same as I use A tag, exactly the same. I'm already reusing it. I used it here and I use it here. It is a reusable component. Okay, so let me run it and I'll show you what it means. So you can see here I have two salam alaikum, one coming from first usage and the second is coming from the second usage. Let me show you one more feature you can do with components. You can see here what I'm doing here with this A tag. What I'm doing. I am here passing some parameters to this tag. I am passing the link that will be used. And I'm passing here a target. When I click it, the link should open in another tab. So what I'm doing here, I'm passing parameters. I can do the same with this. This is like an HTML tag. I can pass hello name, and the name can be, let's say, okay, let's say program. CS program, let's say. And this is in the first usage. In here, in this second usage, I can say, Ali, I am from CE program. Okay. Now what I'm doing here, I am passing parameters to this component. So how do I receive it at the component side? By putting some variable here to receive this input. What's the name of the variable? Props. If you don't call it props, your other React people will say you're not React professional. What is the naming convention for the parameters coming into the components? Props. Call it props. You can call it whatever. But what is the convention? Props. That's it. Now, once you put it there, you can put here props.name props.program. Component is what? A function that you join GSX. Component, what's the second concept? Components, when you create a component, what are you creating? An HTML tag. Okay, when you use it, what can you do with that HTML tag? You can pass parameters to it. When you receive those parameters, where do you receive them? In the props parameter. And the props will give you access to the parameter passed by the caller of the user of your component. That's all I want you to learn now. We will come. Other stuff will come. Is clear so far? Okay. Now in here, in this first usage, what I'm doing here, I am creating a new element and asking React, please take this element and plug it in here. Yeah? That's all I'm doing. In here, what I am doing, I am using this new element inside another element. You see here, this is a div. I have a link. Then I have my component. You see here, it's not something strange. It's blended very nicely with HTML. It doesn't look strange, yes? But it just reminds us that it is a component by that uppercase. But the rest is exactly the same. It looks like an HTML tag. You really want to look carefully. I am doing here a function call, and I'm passing two parameters, the name and the program. It just happens to look like, because I'm building a user interface. The user interface should look more like this rather than function calls. Yes? So it will click. It will take some time to click. But what are the main concepts that we should be familiar by so far? Three major concepts. What are these? Component is a function, nothing else. A component returns JSX. A component, when it's used, it looks like as if you are using HTML tag. And a component can receive parameters. That's it. When you pass these parameters, you are passing them the same way you pass parameters to HTML tags. And when you receive them as parameters to your components, what is the convention of naming the parameter? Props. That's it. This is the basic idea. Yes? Of course, we will build on this to move forward. But if this is not clear, we cannot move forward. Is it clear to everyone? The concept of what component is? Okay, moving on. One more component I will show you. One more thing. Before I move forward, let me just make clear. Before this can be executed, what will happen? What will happen to this JSX? It will be transpiled. We don't use compile. We use, what's the keyword? What's the new keyword? Transpile. By whom? Bubble. By a library called Bubble. At the end of the day, that JSX will be transformed to an object. Yeah. What about this? It looks like a tag. It will be translated to what? It will be translated to a function call. A function call. At the end of the day, because this one, what is it at the end? It's a function call. Who does all this translation? Bubble. Yeah. That's why when I imported the React, can you see here? I imported the React libraries, and then I imported this Bubble here. And not only this, in the script I put here type is not JavaScript. This is kind of a React component returning JSX, but before the browser can understand them, what needs to happen? They need to be transpiled. Yeah? This is only to get you started, but in real world, I will show you shortly. When we develop our program, we transpile it, then we run it. Yeah? We transpile it, then we run it. It will come, but the major concept is what I just discussed. So we can move on now. Okay, so the next component I want to show you, here it is. Yeah, this component, you can see here it has some counter, and I can up and down, up and down. I can increase it and I can increment it and decrement it. Yeah, so this component maintains inside it, it maintains some piece of data. What is this data it maintains? We call it state. The private data the component maintains, what do we call it? State. No, props. What are props? Parameters coming from the outside world. Yes? And the data that is inside and private to the component, what do we call it? State. In this case, what do you think? What is the state this component is maintaining? Sorry? The count. The count. Thank you very much. The count. And now when I click this button, what happened? What happened to the state? Changing the state, increasing the state.
Does it give an ID to the state?
Sorry?
Does it give
No, state is a variable basically. State. What is the state at the end of the day? Is a variable. Where is this variable living? Inside the state. sorry, inside the component. And this variable is private to the component. Can the outside world see this variable? No, except if the component decides so, and I will show you later. But for now, what's the second concept I want to tell you? Some components have what? State. Yeah? Now, when I increase this, when I click these buttons, what's happening to the state? State is changing, and then the user interface is updated. The state is changing, and the user interface is updated. Okay. There are a lot of concepts here. I will explain them shortly. But let me show you how this component looks like. Here it is. This component is super simple. I have here two buttons, plus and minus. This code should be familiar to you. When on click, I call this function. And on click, I call this function. On click of decrement, I call this function. This is another power of React, which uses plain JavaScript. This is plain JavaScript. This is nothing new here to you, yes? Now, what I am doing, what is new to you, you might do something like this. Let me just comment this one. Let me comment this. The naive way you might come if you are new to React, when you increment, you might be doing something like this. When you decrement, you might be doing something like this, yes? So what I'm doing here, displaying the value of the state. And what I'm doing here, calling these functions to change the state. And what I'm doing here again, displaying this value of the state. Yeah? Okay. So I want to add one more thing here. Console.log count. And console.log count. Yes? Now, let me go here. Refresh my page. Oh, okay. I want to initialize it. Can you see here? I want to initialize it with the value coming from the outside world. What is the value coming from the outside world? It's called start value. What I want to show you here, when I want to use these components, can you see here? I'm creating a new component. What's the name of it? Counter. And it receives props, and this props has the start value. So this is how I use it. I use this tag, counts tag, and I'm setting this value start to 2. Yeah. So when the component starts, this value that I'm passing, I use it to initialize the count. Yeah. So if I go back, refresh, you see here this is 2. Here is my inspect. Please follow this carefully. If you understand what I'm talking about, you will be 50% already in the journey to React. Okay, take a look at this. I am changing the state. Can you see it? The state is changing. You can see here. But what's the problem? The UI is not changing. The state is changing, but the UI is not changing. Yeah? Why is this? This is a problem. This is my state variable. The state is changing, but React is not aware of this change. And React is not updating the page, not updating the user interface. Okay, so how do we solve this? Yes, please.
Maybe there's some sort of listener input or
very good. In here, not really listener. What we say, what we do is whenever we change the state, what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to let React know. Whenever we change the state, what we're supposed to do? We should ask React, we should let React know. That's why when we create state variables, we never create state variables the way we just create a variable. What we do is we create state variables using this function called useState. So we ask React, please create for us a state variable. React will do two things. We'll create the variable and will give us a function to use whenever we update the variable, we have to update it through this function. We should not update the variable directly. If we update the variable directly, what will happen? React will not be aware of this change. Okay, so instead of incrementing this, I should say set count and increment the previous value. And here, instead of directly changing the variable, I should set count. What happened is, I don't need to touch the UI. I just need to change the state. And the UI will be auto-refreshed, auto-updated. So let me refresh this and I will explain it. Can you see here now? It's working happily. So the idea, the fundamental idea here is, if a component has a state, yes? If a component has state, you declare variables, of course, to hold the state. But you should not change the variable directly. What you should do, you should change them through functions that React gives you. So when you change the state, React is aware of it. Why does React need to be aware of the state changes? It can auto-refresh the page, re-renders the component. So what I want to say here, in the power of React, the reason why it's called, in the first place, why do we call a React React?
Because it's reacting to pushing buttons and doing actions.
No, not really. Not really. JavaScript can do that very, very well. You can listen to, in fact, for listening to events, we're using plain JavaScript. Can you see it here?
What you do with the methods to update the UI?
We don't deal with, as developers, we don't update the UI ourselves. If we want to update the UI, what should we do? Update the state. And who updates the UI? React. So what happened is, this is a fundamental concept in React. You have a component, and this component has state, okay? You just display this, you build, of course, you build a UI to display the state. Now, if you want to change the UI, just change the state. Who will take care of re-rendering and updating the UI? React will do so. So basically what's going on is, if a component has a state, as developers, what is our role? Update the state. And what's the role of React? Change the UI based on the state. Let me first emphasize this concept visually so it is clear in your mind. Here is the concept. Fundamental concept. If you understand this concept, then you are more than 50% on the road to React. When you are doing event handlers in React, you never go to the DOM and start changing the DOM. You saw in your homework or even in the exam you will do this afternoon, what you will be doing?
Changing the DOM.
Yes, you will get some data, let's say from the server, generate some new HTML elements, go to the DOM and change it. In React, do we do that? We don't do that. Well, in React, what is the mindset or what is the programming model? Change the state. And then what React does? Update the UI. Yeah? So, not only this, wherever that state happens to appear, React will change it for you. It is guaranteed it will change. So what I mean by this, look at this. You see this state here. If I put it 10,000 times or, yeah? Even if I put it as a separate component, let me try it. Take a look at this, sorry. I think this is very, very important. Let's say, let me create another one here, message. I have a message component. And all this message component does, it returns an H1. Yeah, and what is in here? Props.count. Are you following? What I'm doing here?
Passing the counts to the message.
I'm creating a new component called message, and I'm passing this guy here. So how do I use this new component I just created?
The
HTML tag.
So I'll come here.
So what does ampersand NBSP mean?
So which one? The
NPSP.
NBSP be below.
below.
Yes, count equal count
NPSP.
above.
Above the button.
Above the button. Oh yeah. This is just a space. This is just a space. Space. Yeah. If I just put space like this, the HTML will ignore it. Will not render a space. If I want to explicitly render space, I'm just lazy to put margins and padding. This is not recommended, of course. To do proper spacing is to use margins and padding. But in here, just a lazy way of forcing the browser to put a space. Okay, so in here, what I'm doing, I am rendering this new component message. What I will pass to it, count equal count. Yep, count equal count. Yep.
Also, Doctor, you forgot the curly brackets above in the message function.
The
Message function.
Yep.
Curly brackets, right?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, very good. If I don't put curly braces, it will be string. Yeah. You see here, I can say here current count. Are you following? So this is the parent component, and this is what? The child component. And what the parent component is doing? Passing a props to the child component. Okay, take a look at this. Now, take a look. When I increment this, can you see the child component is getting the new value? This is very, very powerful. If you want to do this yourself in JavaScript, it's very challenging to always keep track of changing variables and updating the UI wherever that variable happens to appear. It's very challenging. If you are an experienced Java developer, this is one of the useless tasks, annoying tasks that's very challenging to do. And this is the power of React. The idea of React, if a component has a state, yes, if a component has state, what you do is, whenever you have an event handler, all you do, you change the state. And React guarantees for you that wherever that state happens to be used, even if it is passed to another component, that state variable will change everywhere. And this is why it is in the first place called React. Why the React is called React? It re-renders the components whenever two things happen, whenever the state change or the props change. Yeah? Okay, so now what is the difference between props and state?
Props are not changing.
First of all, what they are?
The
Thank you very much. So the parent, how does the parent communicate with the child? Through props. How does the parent communicate with the child? Through props. Props come from parent to child, and props are read-only. The child cannot change the props. Yes? Now, what is a state? No, it's very different. State is private variable within the component. Who can change this state? Only the component itself. How can the component pass the state to another component? Through props. Are you following? So from parent to child, how the communication takes place?
Props.
Through props. And inside the components, some components have state, and only that component can maintain the state. No other components from outside can change the state of another component. The only way, the only communication channel between the components is, so far, is props. You said props. Are you clear? Now, the state variables, when you create state variables, you don't just declare them. You don't just declare them using the normal declaration like this. How you should declare them? Using this use state. This is a function in a React. And what it does, it returns to you an array. this is basically doing array restructuring. Remember array restructuring? Remember we did the color 1, color 2, you had it even in the middle. So this one returning an array, and this array has 2 elements. What are these 2 elements? The variable and the function to change it. The variable and the function to change it. And here you can name it whatever you wish. It's up to you what you name it. But don't declare the variable directly. You should let React help you declare the variables. Because React will always have a state variable associated with it is what? A function to change it. If you want to change the state, can you just go to the variable, state variable, and change it directly? If you do that, React will not re-render the page, will not re-render the components. Instead, if you want to change the state, what should you do? Go through the set methods that are the set functions created using set state. Created using use state. Why are we doing this? Why are we changing our states through this state set star functions? So to notify React to re-render the components and to re-render any other component that are depending on this piece of state. Is clear? Okay. Last concept. Sorry, I know I'm late. Last concept, I'll let you go. Here is it. Here it is. Here is a list of friends. Very powerful. So what I'm doing here, can somebody help me explain this? This is basically a function called friends list. It takes as an input friends. And what I'm doing here, I'm looping through and generating a list item for each of the friends. Yeah. Now, I have another one here. This is a form. Can you see here? This is a form. What this form has, well, let me first, by the way, this way of doing it, this is just for demonstration purposes. In real life, the way I build applications, I have, as I told you, there is a single page. This is a single page application. This is the only HTML page I have. And all it has, it just has one div where I will plug in my components, and it has one reference to one script. Yeah? Now, when I want to run this component, when I want to run my app, the way I run it, I will use something called parcel. There are many libraries that will allow you to do this, but one of them is very simple. This parcel library, what it will do, it will go to this HTML and go to all the JavaScripts used by this HTML, and it will transpile it and bundle it together as one file. You see here, I have so many components, so many files. This little utility called parcel, there are other utilities. There is Webpack, there is many other utilities. All it will do, it will get all my components, transpile them, which means translate JSX to plain JavaScript, and bundles all this in one file. Yeah, and in this case, it will also run my app. Here it is. It will run my app and make it available in this URL. These are components. You can see I have many components here. Each one is separate. So if I refresh, I don't even need to refresh. I have one component that displays some people. I have the counter component. I have friends here, and I can add more friends. I have here login page. Lots of examples I will be explaining later on. So each of this stuff that you see here is a component. Each of them is a component, so run separately. And the basic idea I just explained, based on that, there is only one more idea left, which is if the child wants to talk to the parent, how do we do that? We know how the parent talks to a child, but we don't know yet how the child talks to a parent. Okay. So the only skill left, how the child talks to a parent and how to do routing.